Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto unlocked Abyssal Dragon Eyes? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Spark Under the Leaves. Rain turned the village into a blur of lanterns and edges. Roof tiles flashed slick under moonlight. Somewhere, a dog barked and then thought better of it when a shadow vaulted across a gable and vanished over the next. Naruto didn't feel the rain. He felt the weight of the scroll across his back, the bandage binds cutting under his arms, the breath in and out that he'd learned to count when his chest kicked into panic. 1, 2, 3. Vault, catch. The cord bit, the wood creaked, the night accepted him. Leaves brushed his cheek as he fell into the trees beyond the training grounds. He hit earth in a crouch, ankle jangling from the drop. And grinned at the emptiness of the world out here. No stairs, no muttered names, just the good smell of wet bark and old soil and the faint iron taste the air song. E-times carried when a storm was hunting its tail on the horizon. He pulled the scroll off, set it on a stump, and breathed. Okay, he whispered, one forbidden technique, coming right up. He unrolled D in arm's length, half expecting a chorus of angry elders to leap out of the paper. Rows of ink swam in the lantern glow he'd filched from the tool shed. The characters bent and nodded and sent his yes skidding until they caught on a diagram he knew by rumor, by graffiti scrawled under desks, by the way Mizuki-sensei had said it like a dare. Shadow clone. He worked. Practice settled him in a way talking never did. His world shrank. Fingers, chakra, a breathing rhythm he'd learned by breaking. The first attempts popped like crushed soap bubbles. The next lodged sideways and left him dizzy. On the 7th try, he felt the trick unlatch. Chakra made a seam in the air and he shoved himself into it, and there he was twice over, two idiots grinning at each other in the rain. The copies didn't wobble like illusions. They stood. They breathed steam. They flicked water off their sleeves and traded a look that said, "We could really ruin somebody's night with this." Naruto laughed. It shook his whole body. The kind of laugh that got him shushed in class and made Iruka's mouth twitch like he wanted to laugh too. "Good," a voice said from the dark. "Good, good. You learn fast." The laugh died between his ribs. Rain went louder in the leaves. He didn't turn his head so much as fold his weight around like a cat and let his vision cut sideways, through the near dark, into the shape of a manla. Aiming one shoulder against a crooked tree. "Mizuki, hair damp. Smile easy. You did it," Mizuki said. "I knew you had it in you." The scroll asked for someone with guts. "You were late," Naruto said. His copies stood angled, not quite threatening, not quite not. Iruka-sensei said. Ah. Mizuki's smile thinned a fraction. Iruka, he always did like rules. Where's the fun in that? Anyway, he's on his way. You'll show him your progress. We'll get you that recognition you deserve, and... Naruto's shoulders tightened. Recognition. It was like a coin held up, just out of reach, gleaming. "And then you're going to come with me." He didn't move. The words fell wrong. "Come where?" Mizuki lifted a hand, palm up. Rain beaded and slipped. "You know what they are, these techniques. Weapons. The villa. GE stockpiles them and gives them to the ones who already have everything. You and I, we're the ones who have to take. Who have to make our own place." The stupid thing about hunger was how it made worse ideas sound like food. Naruto swallowed. His copies flicked their gaze between him and Mizuki like crows watching a coin. Behind them, a foot scuffed. A breath caught. "Don't." Iruka's voice lived, at the edge of relief and warning at once. He stood just within the ring of light like he didn't want to step on it. His vest was damp and the scar across his nose glistened. "Mizuki." Step back from him. Mizuki's smile flipped to something flatter. "Sensei, you always did have timing like a bent clock." "Mizuki," Iruka said again. "That scroll is a death sentence if you walk out with it. And Naru, too." His eyes flicked over Naruto's shoulder, took in the clones, took in the rain. Pride nicked his voice before he hit it. "Good work. But put it away and come here. Now." That coin gleam in Naruto's chest dimmed. He didn't like being told what to do. He didn't like being told at all. But Iruka's eyes were not the same as the teacher's voice in class. They were the eyes he'd seen once across a ramen shop counter when Iruka had realized Naruto was pretending not to notice he couldn't afford extra pork and added it anyway. They were the eyes of someone who remembered. Mizuki dropped the hand. The air around his fingers smudged. Naruto didn't know the name of the technique that formed a disk of wind that left the rain in slices, and he didn't need to. His skin told him. It lifted, prickled, warned. The clones lunged without waiting for him, because they were him. They rushed to block, to make a wall of wrong-angled elbows and bad decisions, and this time it might be enough. The disc scythed through the first clone like paper. It popped. The second caught it with a kunai and went spinning into a tree as the metal shrieked. That scream of air, Naruto would have called it a note if he kn. EU music, split the rain and came searching for his ribs. Something inside him, part panic, part red thread that had never broken, went taut. Sound pulled away from him like wool drawn off a spill of oil. The lantern didn't dim, everything else did. The rain slowed to visible beaded lines. Mizuki's arm wasn't moving. It had moved, and he was watching the echo. Naruto's vision narrowed to the disc itself, a bright, whirring thing, and there were cracks in it, hairline, as if someone had flexed glass and it held only out of pride. He didn't have a name for the way he saw that. He had only a sense. Touch it there. He didn't jump back. He stepped into it. He shifted his wrist and the kunai in his hand wasn't a blade so much as a finger he used to tap a spot in the spinning edge that felt thin. The metal chirped. The disc juddered. He brought the kunai down again. It shattered. Not like ice, not like steel. It broke like an argument collapsing on itself. Air whooped back into the clearing and the rain came roaring down. Mizuki stared at him with his mouth a fraction open. Iruka moved with the old grace he sometimes forgot he had. He struck Mizuki hard in the shoulder and slammed him into the tree with all the gentleness of someone saving a life. For a second, it was just hands and breath and weight and Naruto realizing his heart had been beating in his throat. Mizuki, Iruka grunted, you're under arrest. Mizuki snarled. The wind around his arm shivered and bit. Iruka took it in the vest and didn't yell, which was worse than yelling. Naruto lunged, then checked. His hand had found a different balance than usual and the angle he'd used to shatter the disc wanted to come back and do it again and again until nothing would ever cut him. Iruka's knees hit the mud. Naruto saw it like a hand pushing him from behind. He shoved Mizuki off with a raw tackle that cracked the tree bark and sent Mizuki cursing and rolling. He dropped by Iruka without remembering crossing the distance. Blood went hot under his fingers. It pooled in the rain and tried to trick his eyes into thinking it wasn't red. Iruka's breath came small and tight. I'm fine, Iruka said through teeth. I've had worse. Naruto, you need to. No, Naruto said, and it came out flatter than he meant. The coin that had dimmed turned to something else. Not cold, exactly, but smooth. It made decisions straight lines. Don't talk. Breathe. I got you. He hadn't got anything. He had a torn vest, a shallow cut that loved to bleed, and 2 shaking hands. He tore his pouch open, fumbled for bandages. His fingers wouldn't listen. He didn't have enough hands. Everything always took more hands than one person had. The smoothness rose again. The lantern light climbed into his eyes and stayed. The night gave up sounds that weren't necessary. Naruto pressed his palm to Iruka's wound, found the way the body wanted pressure, and threads. They weren't threads. They were choices that looked like threads. Invisible lines the air admitted to being. He reached for one and it took his hand. It made the bandage pull around his fingers like a tame snake. It let him lay the cloth across the wound without lifting his palm. It let him knot one end while another end held still on nothing but will. Iruka said, very quietly, like a man who didn't want to frighten a skittish animal, Naruto. Your eyes. What about them? They're dark. A small laugh that wasn't happy. And calm. Naruto blinked. The night blinked back. The calm didn't vanish, but it allowed his awareness to widen. He knew where Mizuki had gone with Chi looking. The wet leaves carried the sound of his retreat like a rumor. He knew the scroll sat 2 steps behind him and to the left and wanted to slide off the stump and into the mud. He knew Iruka as trying not to put a hand on his shoulder because he didn't want to break whatever this was, and he knew he wanted that hand there. You're going to be okay, Naruto said. He believed it in a way he could put his teeth in. He wrapped the bandage tighter. The invisible lines eased away like a neighbor returning a borrowed tool. A chuckle floated in from the trees. Not the wet slap of Mizuki dragging himself up. Not the hushed sound of a shinobi landing. Something slower. A man with time. A clean break, the voice said. Interesting. Most people who meet their edge in a wind blade don't get to discuss it. Naruto turned his head. The calm held. A figure stepped into the lantern light and wasn't surprised by it. He wore a long coat. Not a shinobi vest. Not a merchant robe. Cloth that could age. Avenue belonged to a monk except for the way it fell, like the air got out of its way. Around his wrist, prayer beads circled 3 times, old wood polished by fingers and rain. Each bead bore a tiny stamp. A ring of lines radiating from a circle. When he lifted his hand to show they were empty, the beads caught the light and made a neat little sun. I'm looking for Mizuki, he said conversationally. And Naruto had the absurd flash that if the man had walked into Ichiraku and said it that way, Tsuki would have poured him broth and told him to wait. He ran this way. Have you seen him? Who are you? Iruka said. The old authority came back under the strain. Identify yourself. A pilgrim, the man said, which was not an answer. He looked at Naruto's eyes with a curiosity so tidy it felt like politeness. Which was how very polite people got away with things. You shouldn't be out alone in the woods. There are hunters here who mistake hunger for necessity. Which one are you? Naruto asked. The man smiled. The kind that asks questions first. He tipped his head in a nod that might have been respect and might have been a simple acknowledgement that they existed at the same time, and stepped back the way he'd come. The beads made a small sound like rain on wood. The night accepted him in and smudged over him as if the light had been painted fresh and was still wet. Stay away from him, Iruka said under his breath. If you see that mark again, sun rays, like a child draws, stay away. Naruto tilted his head. Why? Because people who wear gods on their wrists, Iruka said, like to play them in the dark. Mizuki did not come back. That told Naruto 2 things. 1. The monk had either found him or scared him into a different bad decision. 2. There would be more conversation. About tonight than he could talk his way out of. The lantern made a circle in the rain. Naruto tightened the last knot and looked at Iruka's face. His teacher's mouth did that twitch again, fighting. Between scolding and relief, and Naruto felt something rush up in him that wasn't calm at all. I didn't mean to, he said. He didn't know which part he meant. The scroll, the eyes, the tap at the exact place a wind blade breaks. Iruka shook his head. You meant to protect me. I meant to protect me, Naruto said, because the smoothness hated a lie, and then he added, Lo, and you. Mostly you. Don't make it weird. Iruka's laugh went soft. It was always weird with you. They moved after that because the world hadn't stopped to admire them. Iruka wouldn't let Naruto carry him. Pride was a stub-born friend. But he leaned hard enough that Naruto felt it as permission, which was better. Naruto slung the scroll across his back again and tucked the lantern into the cradle of his arm. He felt the way the wet earth gave and took and used it. The new steadiness in him made the ground feel less like a thing that might shift out from under him at any second. At the edge of the forest, he told Irik to wait in the dark and went ahead alone. He knew which roots made noise when you stepped on them. He knew the way light threw itself at a puddle and came back wrong when somebody stood just behind it. He crept up to the clearing where the training ground bled into town and counted 6 shadows that didn't belong there. He reached back without turning and let the invisible lines in his hands find Iruka's sleeve. Iruka's fingers touched his once, brief, steady, and then took the hint and followed 2 steps back, quiet as he could be. Naruto's eyes adjusted on their own. They liked the dark now. He didn't think about that. The shadows belonged to a bounty hunter with iron-gray hair and a sword that drank the light, to 2 chunin he recognized by their voices even before they stepped forward. And to the big shape of a man who wore command like a coat. Stand down, the big man said. Iruka, Naruto. The rain hit his shoulders and rolled off. You're both in trouble, but you're both alive. That's a start, sir, Iruka said, and Naruto felt the string of his name pull taut in the air as if a bell had been struck. He refused to flinch. Naruto, The iron-haired man said with neighborly interest, "You look interesting." "What's your name?" Naruto said, because names were handholds. "Kurogane," the man said. "And before you pull something brave, kid, I'd like to observe that I get paid. Either way, and I prefer my laundry without blood." "Good news," Naruto said. "I prefer my laundry without your face." One of the Chunin snorted despite himself. The big man gave him a look and the snort died of shame. The bounty hunter, Kurogane, tapped the sword against his shoulder. It didn't sound like metal. It sounded like striking a river. "Scroll," he said mildly. "Or you can show me that ick again where you put your heart in your hand. I always like seeing new crafts up close." Naruto's throat warmed. He hadn't realized how much the new steadiness wanted confrontation. Not for pain. Saint to draw the straightest line between a threat and the part where the threat stopped moving. Iruka's hand ghosted toward him, then stopped. Trust, again. It would have been easier if Iruka had told him to run. It would have been bitter. But easy. The not telling made the decision Naruto's. He put the lantern down in the mud and stepped forward. "Hey," he said to Kurogane, because politeness made a good trap. "What happens if I don't give you the scroll?" Kurogane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I cut the air out of your lungs." "You can do that?" Naruto asked, curious for real. "No," Kurogane said honestly. "But I can make it feel like I did." The big man made a small movement that said patience had an end. Naruto could have let it end. He could have simply handed the scroll over and let the elders parade their anger across his day. He could have done 1,000 things that would keep the world in one piece long enough for tomorrow to arrive. He thought of the monk's beads catching light. He thought of Iruka bleeding slow and careful because screaming would have cost them time. He thought of Mizuki's eyes when the disc broke, empty with surprise because he had never imagined not being the one with the sharpest thing. "Okay," Naruto said. He didn't reach for the scroll. He reached for the gap between Kurogane and the sword. The first step mattered. If he took it wrong, he'd be a boy rushing a blade. If he took it right, he'd be the blade Kurogane didn't know he'd already swallowed. He let his weight fall not forward but down, into the soft mud, into the angle where the rain had made a little slide at the base of the slope. His foot hit it and didn't slide. The knight admitted that he had told it not to. Kurogane's sword moved. Naruto's eyes took the world apart in lines again. The blade drank chakra. He felt it with the same sense that had found the weakness in the wind disk. It took a bite at anything that tried to touch it, like a dog guarding a bowl. "Fine. Don't touch it." He threw a kunai anyway. Not at the sword, but at the space where Kurogane's elbow might prefer to be if he wanted to keep his balance. Kurogane moved it out of habit and scowled when he realized the habit had been used. Naruto closed the distance like a trick of the light. He didn't try to block. He skimmed the edge that wanted to clean him up and tapped Kurogane's wrist at the place the tendons crossed and made a little peek under skin. The sword jumped a fraction to make room for pain. Naruto reached past it and took Kurogane's sleeve and the mud and the knight and told them all to be friends. And Kurogane went down. Not far, just enough to make the ground remember it was above him. The bounty hunter rolled. The sword wrote a line across the rain and cut 3 droplets neatly in half before they hit the ground. Naruto didn't try to be where the line was. He let it find the space between where he'd been and where he was. He had never moved like this. It felt like finishing a sentence he hadn't known he'd started years ago. The Chunin swore and split to either side. Iruka didn't yell. The big man stayed still, watching, expression trying hard not to shift into interest. "Okay," Kurogane said again. But the easy tone had gravel in it now. He spun the blade in a little circle that made the rain tilt away as if confused. "You're interesting. That sword of yours," he nodded at Naruto's empty hands. "Made of questions." "Yours," Naruto said, "made of excuses." Kurogane's mouth twitched. "Careful, I like you." He came in clean. He fought like water that had learned ambition. Naruto met him with the new sense and a body that finally had something better to do with its energy than vibrate. Kurogane's blade ate chakra. Naruto stopped offering it. Instead he offered choices, little tugs on angles, taps on places where joints didn't like to be. He let Kurogane's momentum become not an advantage but something that needed to be carried like a sack of wet grain. Kurogane adapted. He always had another answer. Men like him didn't get old in his work without that. The sword dipped, fainted, rose, and Naruto saw the feint and didn't answer it. He answered the way Kuragane's breath shortened on the left side when he turned on his back foot. He took that. He took it the way hunger took the easiest bite. The calm in him hummed like a held note, not thin yet, not empty, zhu. T steady enough to sharpen the cruelty of choice. End it here. Break the wrist, break the sword hand, break the man behind the sword and make yourself safe forever. He didn't move his hand. He stepped inside the blade, shoulder to shoulder, and did the other thing the calm allowed. He made a decision not to win the fastest way. He slid his arm under Kuragane's and hooked it, and the sword had no room. And Kuragane's elbow found the kunai's earlier suggestion to move again and discovered it couldn't. Naruto settled their weight together, a handshake with gravity, and laid Kuragane in the mud. Iway you lay a board carefully so it won't warp. Kuragane stared up at him, rain in his eyes. Say it, he said. What? That you could have, Kuragane said softly. Say it so I know whether to be careful around you for the right reasons. Quote, Naruto thought of saying nothing. He thought of jokes. He thought of how good it would feel to hear the words out loud. He swallowed them. I don't have to, he said. Kuragane laughed. It came out delighted and grudging. He let his hand open. The sword stopped drinking light. It lay as an ordinary thing and looked annoyed about it. The big man stepped forward. He carried command the way a blacksmith carries heat in his skin after a long day. You didn't see it so much as feel it when he passed. You, he said to Kuragane without looking at him, are getting your bounty from my desk tomorrow and you will not so much as breathe on this boy between now and then. Fair, Kuragane said, not bothering to hide his grin. He rolled to sit and stood with a little hiss. I found a better story anyway. And you, the big man said to Naruto, are going to walk to the Hokage's office like someone who understands that his feet are attached to his legs by the grace of 30 years of me saying so. Quote, Naruto opened his mouth, closed it, and forced himself not to look at Iruka like a plea. He didn't need to. Iruka stepped in and took the place between him and everyone else with the casual rudeness of someone who had decided the world could wait its turn. He saved my life, Iruka said. He broke a wind blade with a kunai. He stabilized a wound with one hand. And he brought me back breathing. We can talk about the scroll. But we can also talk about the sky being blue. The big man's eyebrows inched. Is it? It is tonight, Iruka said. Because he made it so. Naruto didn't blush. He had too much steadiness in him for that right now. He did feel something crack a little in his chest, a thin layer over softer stuff. He hoped it didn't show in his face. He could feel people more sharply than usual. Even their breath seemed to move like a visible thing. And he didn't want anyone to see him the way he saw them, made of weak points and kindnesses and habits that could be broken. They walked. The bounty hunter flanked them a polite few paces back, sword at ease, eyes amused with the particular affection of a man who respected anyone who refused to be easy. The Chunin moved ahead to warn or to make sure no one stumbled into them with the wrong questions first. The big man paced at Iruka's side like a promise that things would be hard but within the category of hard the village understood. At the office, the Hokage listened and smoked and did the thing with his eyes where he put a whole story into a drawer behind them and locked it with a key only he had. He didn't remark on Naruto's pupils. He didn't even look at them long. He looked at Iruka's bandage with more interest than he let show, and at the name Mizuki like he was pulling a EAD and seeing where the cloth wanted to come apart. Mizuki will be dealt with, he said mildly, which was the sort of phrase that meant different things to different people and somehow always comforted them all. And the scroll? Naruto asked, because someone had to do it. The Hokage's mouth twitched. The scroll's lesson is to be learned once, he said. You have learned it. That wasn't an answer. It was the right shape, though. Go home, the Hokage said, softer. Sleep. Both of you. We will speak in the morning. Naruto nodded as if sleep was a thing you could do on schedule. They left tea. He warmth and the smell of pipe smoke and the sense that someone had put weights on all the spinning things so they wouldn't fling off into the dark. Outside, the rain had softened to a whisper. The village at 2 in the morning felt like a person breathing slowly because they didn't want to wake the person next to them. Iruka put a hand on Naruto's head, a brief compression that didn't ruffle hair or try to make a point. Naruto set his chin and let it stay there a second longer than necessary. "You did good," Iruka said. Naruto looked down at the toes of his sandals. His voice wanted to come out as a joke. He didn't let it. "You too," Iruka snorted. "I lay down very bravely." Naruto smiled and didn't mean for the smile to feel fragile. He stuffed his hands in his pockets and looked toward the rooftops like maybe there. In the higher air, his chest would open easier. "Go on," Iruka said. "Before I remember I'm supposed to yell." Naruto went. He didn't roam the streets for once. He went up, tile to tile, beam to beam. The village made a different kind of sense from above, the way a scribble becomes a map when you take 3 steps back. He crossed the span to the academy roof and stowed where he had stood so many times to catch the morning bell and the way the dawn made even the cracked paint look important. He put his hands on the edge of the roof and looked at the place where night softened toward gray. The calm in him had not left. It hadn't sharpened into something mean, but it had not faded either. He could feel it looking at people like puzzles. He didn't like that. He didn't hate it. He hated that he didn't know which he felt. He closed his eyes. He found the invisible lines again. Not the ones in a blade or a joint. The ones that ran between him and the world that had never loved him. They hummed with the potential to be cut. He could cut them. He could live in the smooth place where no voice reached him and all choices had edges. He opened his eyes on purpose. The sky in the east had the faintest scratch of color. The stone faces on the mountain kept their watch. He wasn't sure what he saw in them, but he saw it often enough that it felt like a conversation. "Hey," he said to the stone, to the dawn, to himself, to Iruka walking home braced against soreness, and to the monk whose beads had made the lantern light a little cruel. "I'm not going to be a weapon." The calm listened. "I'm not going to be a victim either." The village breathed. Somewhere, a window slammed because a baby had kicked and a parent had fumbled the latch and sworn softly and then loved the baby anyway. Somewhere, 2 chunin on patrol stamped their feet and argued about dumplings. Somewhere, a cat found a dry crate and made it a throne. Naruto leaned forward into the wind enough to feel it push back. He set his jaw. "I'm going to be a shield," he said, and the word fit in his mouth like a future he could bite. The coin gleam in his chest didn't come back. Something steadier did. It didn't burn. It took up space. He stayed until the edge of the sky made a thin white line and the roofs went from black to charcoal and then to the color of wet stone, and the rain gave up entirely, disappointed but not surprised. His eyes ached in a way blinking didn't fix. He rubbed them with heel of hand and winced. They didn't hurt like headache. They hurt like muscle after a new kind of work. Bootsteps clicked on the ladder hatch behind him. He didn't startle. He knew who it was from the way the air changed before she broke it. Hinata came up careful, as if the roof might be sleeping and she didn't want to wake it. She had a towel around her shoulders and her hair held the memory of rain. When she saw him, she smiled quick and then looked away because full smiles were heavy things to hold. She stopped, found the shape of a sentence that would stand. "I was looking for you. You found me," Naruto said, and the line came out light because it felt like a relief to let anything be light. She drew closer. Not too close. Her eyes flicked to his and then passed, as if checking the horizon. If she noticed what his eyes were now, she didn't say. Or she had noticed already and decided to greet him first. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah." He thought about it. "Almost." She nodded. "Iruka-sensei." "Alive," he said, and let himself enjoy the way her shoulders loosened. Bandaged, angry, proud, in that order. Hinata's mouth did the quiet laugh that didn't need sound. "Good." They stood. Night softened. Naruto's chest did that thing again where it made room and didn't know what to put in the space. He would have filled it with sound if he were alone. He didn't, with her. He let the silence be the world's. She glanced at his hands. "You're shaking." He looked. He hadn't noticed. The steadiness had held him still. The shaking had gone somewhere else to wait. It had found his fingers and begun there. He tucked his hands under his elbows and made a face. "Don't tell anyone." She didn't laugh. She stepped close enough to touch, then waited. He didn't pull away. She took his wrist, just above the bones, just enough pressure to be there and not to hold. It was stupid how much that helped. "You were brave," she said. He rolled his eyes. I was something brave, she said again, and her voice didn't let him slide off it. And kind. The word landed hard. He made a sound that might have been an answer and might have been a piece of breath from somewhere he didn't use often. Her gaze dipped to the towel around her shoulders, then back up. I brought this. In case. He took it. It smelled like clean cloth and tea. He set it around his neck and felt childish and then felt human. He let himself be both. Hinata, he said, if I ever look at you and it feels like I'm looking at a plan instead of a person, hit me. She blinked. Her cheeks pinked, a little storm crossing under pale skin. Then she nodded with solemnity that made the corner of his mouth try to climb. I will, she said, but I don't think you will. Do it anyway, he insisted. I will, she said again, and it sounded like promise. In the street 2 roofs over, a child burst through a door and ran yelling about the morning to anyone who would contradict him. The shouting woke a rooster who took it as a personal assault. Naruto snorted. Hinata covered her mouth like she was keeping the laugh from escaping and failing. Their shoulders bumped and didn't move apart. I should go, she said at last, with regret that didn't pretend to be anything else. He nodded. Thanks for the towel. Thanks for. She trailed off. There were too many words and she didn't want to choose the wrong one. She made the compromise that always felt truest. For being you. He wrinkled his nose. Work in progress. She dipped her head in agreement that somehow felt like pride. When she was gone, the roof felt bigger and colder. He didn't mind. He let the chill be what it was. He tucked the towel tighter. He looked east again until the thin white line became a soft gold wash and a bird took issue with another bird over who owned a puddle. Naruto hopped down from the academy and hit the ground already leaning into the day. By the time he saw the monk again, the sun was up. He was where a little street met a larger one, standing by an awning that let rain drip off its corner in a chain. He wasn't looking at Naruto. He was watching a flower seller convince a fat dog that flowers were not food. He smiled when the dog surrendered with a sigh. Naruto could have passed. He didn't. He was tired of living by not being seen. He walked straight up and stopped at a distance that counted as respect. Morning, he said. Good morning, the monk said. He had one of those voices that made you want to be on your best behavior even if you weren't sure what that was. You look like someone who has learned too much and slept too little. Naruto shrugged. I'm good at both. I believe you, the monk said. He turned the beads on his wrist. Up close, the stamped suns looked older. One had a crack running through a ray. Someone had loved them hard. Who are you? Naruto asked. The monk looked amused. People keep asking me that. Answer better, Naruto said. Very well, he said, not offended. I listen for dangerous prayers. Naruto blinked. Is that a job? It is a calling, the monk said lightly. Some people ask for rain. Some ask for money. Some ask for the ability to break impossible things open with their hands. He gave Naruto's eyes a brief and critical look. When the prayer is too interesting, we like to make sure it is heard by adults. Adults, Naruto repeated, deadpan. All look around. The monk laughed. It was not mocking. You remind me of a man who NCE told me that people could be saved by stubbornness alone. He was an optimist and a liar, but he was right about the stubbornness. Naruto said. What do you want from me? For now, the monk's face smoothed. Nothing. For later, if you hear of sunlit mirrors being set up where they do not belong, break them. Or call someone who can. Your village would suffice. Don't put your hands in them. What happens if I do? They bite, the monk said. He said it the way somebody might say, the stove is hot. Naruto pushed his tongue against his teeth and considered telling him to make his own warnings somewhere else. He didn't. The man had found them in the woods. He had gone toward a fight. Naruto didn't see him finish. He had left them alone, which was a choice too. Okay, Naruto said, I'll avoid your shiny mirrors. They aren't mine, the monk said, and this time, the smile didn't reach his eyes. Be careful which prayers you answer, Naruto. Naruto's name in the monk's mouth did not surprise him as much as it should have. He filed the feeling in the drawer where he kept things to think about later and watched the man turn and walk into the thinning rain as if he were simply going to buy rice. He went to Ichiraku because his body could not be sustained on resolve. He ate like a person apologizing to his stomach and let Chuki's chatter and Ayame's eye rolls make him small in the way that didn't feel bad. He paid with money that would be gone too fast and didn't care. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and got scolded for it and accepted the napkin like it was a verdict from a friendly court. When he stepped back into the street, the village had put its daytime face on. The calm inside him had thinned to a film he could see through. He could feel the EY's sometimes tug at the way people's chakra sloshed when they laughed, at the way the old man carrying sake had a wobble in his left knee that would fold if he stepped wrong. He made himself look at faces instead. There were errands. There was a class he might or might not be in trouble for skipping, which was a new feeling. There was Aruka somewhere in the building, pretending he was fine and making tea too strong on purpose. There was the Hokage's morning pipe that would hit the window and make a pattern of ash he loved. There was also the door in him the night had opened. He couldn't unopen it. He could decide what walked through. He went to the training field before he went to class. He stood in the wet grass and looked at the place where the wind disk had cut the rain and left a strange echo. He threw a kunai and watched it fall. He threw another and told it to not. The kunai bent. It wasn't a graceful thing. It lurched like it had hit a rubber rope strung at the edge of sense. It landed soft in the grass. Confused about how, Naruto breathed out. He could do a lot with a rubber rope. Don't, he told himself, and meant it for everything at once. Don't break people to fit easier. Don't let the calm become the only way you can think. Don't stop smiling before ramen because the world is heavy afterward. Don't, he said again, and the word stuck to him like the towel's warmth had. When he did go to class, heads turned. He walked to his seat like he put the floorboards down in front of himself. Someone whispered. Sakura's ponytail gleamed like an opinion. Sasuke's smirk noticed him and didn't say hello. Naruto grinned the grin he wore when he was fine and thought about what to do with a rubber rope. Iruka came in a minute later and the room tried to stand and worried. Whether standing would make his wound open. He made them sit without making a fuss. His eyes settled on Naruto for a fraction longer than any one student got. Pop quiz, he said, and the class tore their souls out in unison. Which was the sort of community Naruto had always wanted. The day did what days do when they're trying to be normal and failing around the edges. By dusk, Naruto's eyes ached again. He stopped at the river. He crouched on the wall and watched the water carry other people's questions away. He felt the calm try to read the currents for places to break. He let it, and then He looked up at the sky and forced himself to count stars instead. He got to 8 before a cloud told him to mind his own business. Kurigane says hi. A voice noted, dry as a towel left too long in the wind. Anko sat on the railing like a warning. She had a bag that probably contained food and definitely contained knives. She looked at him like a coin she wasn't sure was counterfeit or a rare mint. You fight like a good lie, she said, almost true the whole way through. Thanks, he said. That wasn't a compliment, she said, then tilted hand. It was. A little. You could have broken his arm. I know. He said. Good, she said. People who don't know that are dangerous. People who know and still don't, you can work with. He eyed the bag. Is that dango? It is, she said. And it's mine. He looked at her. She looked back. She sighed like she had been bullied by fate. She flipped him a stick. He caught it on the first try and didn't make a face at the heat. Eat, she said. You'll need it. Some monks went shopping for mirrors they're not supposed to be setting up where we live. The kind that make a person like you into a story other people tell while they live handless. Naruto bit the dango. Sweet. Hot. Good. He licked sauce off his thumb and asked the question he had been bumping against all day. What am I? He said. A pain, Anko said, then laughed. A shinobi. A kid. A problem. He didn't bristle. The words didn't sting in her mouth. She used problem like a craftsman used wood. He finished chewing and looked at the river and let the calm and the ache and the pride and the fear line up in him where they weren't arguing so much as refusing to take turns. I'm going to be a shield, he said again, not to try it out this time but to hear what it sounded like next to somebody else's breathing. Anko snorted. That's just a weapon that holds still. Maybe, he said, but it can move. She considered it. You're a menace, He grinned around the last bite. I know. You'll need people, she said. Even a moving shield gets pushed. He nodded, and it was not a plan. It was a fact. By the time he trailed home, the whirl in his chest had slowed. He peeled his wet shirt and threw it at a corner and missed and left it there. He lay on his back and looked at the stained ceiling and pretended he could see the night through it. He thought of Hinata's hand around his wrist, light but real. He thought of Iruka's laugh like a blanket thrown at a draft. He thought of Kurigane's blade and the way it had stopped drinking because he'd asked it to with the right pressure and at the right time. He thought of the monk's beads, patient suns on old wood, clicking like small clocks. He closed his eyes. When sleep found him, it came like rain tapering off. He dreamed of a dark sea and the suggestion of a spine moving under it. He didn't hear words. He heard a hunger call itself by older names than he knew, and he watched it and did not go to it. He let it pass like a wave. He woke before dawn on purpose and climbed again. The roof was his and the sky was generous. He set his hands on the stone and the stone did not warm under them. He liked that. He cared that some things were exactly what they were, even when he changed. He looked east. The line of light came like a blade made of mercy. He was ready to move first. Chapter 1, Part 1, End. Morning made the village honest. The rain had rinsed gossip into gutters, steam rose from roof tiles like good intentions. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office already braced for a scolding and found something worse, paperwork. The third watched him over the smoke of a pipe he wasn't technically supposed to be smoking indoors. I hear, the Hokage said, you broke a wind blade with a tap. Naruto shrugged, trying to look like a person equally capable of remorse and swagger. Lucky angle, The Hokage's eyes smiled without moving. Angles are luck you make. He let the silence sit long enough to teach something without naming it. Then, 2 things. Mizuki is in a cell. And you will not be punished for saving your teacher's life in a way I can't write a form for. Naruto's mouth got ahead of him and then had the good sense to stop. Thank you, he said, and meant it. Third thing, the Hokage added mildly, because leaders always have one more thing in their pocket, you're being placed on a team. You will either be someone your teammates trust, or you will be someone your teammates have to watch. I don't have to tell you which kind of shinobi lives longer. Naruto glanced at the window. Outside, laundry lines were going up like prayer flags. Guess I'll try the first one. Good, the Hokage said. Kakashi will meet you at training ground 3. Kakashi, Naruto repeated. The one who reads during spars. Among other quirks, the Hokage said, amused. Go. Iruka was waiting by the door with tea that had steeped into combat strength. He handed it over without comment. Naruto took it and didn't flinch at the heat. Iruka's eyes dipped to the towel still around Naruto's neck, then up again to his face. A nod, small and private. Naruto gave one back. Class made its noises. Teams were called. Groans, cheers, a squeal that made the chalk rattle. Team 7, Iruka said. Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto felt the room tilt the smallest degree. He looked at Sasuke, who tilted back like a man who had never been off balance in his life and refused to start now. Sakura made a noise like triumph had landed where she'd aimed it. Naruto grinned at them both on principle. Sasuke's smirk said, try me. Sakura's sideways glance said, don't ruin this. Teacher, someone asked, just to keep the ritual alive. Kakashi Hatake, Iruka said, and the room's buzz altered. A few kids made the appreciative oof of gossip proved true. One muttered, late, like an oracle. They were early to the training ground anyway. The river talked itself into foam on the rocks. The old training posts leaned like men in a bathhouse. Sakura pretended to stretch while stealing looks at Naruto's eyes and not looking too long. Sasuke rolled his shoulders with the boredom of someone who sharpened knives to relax. What's with your pupils? Sasuke said finally, in the tone of someone pointing out mud on a shoe. Art, Naruto said. Sakura squinted. He's not lying. Naruto blinked at her. Thanks. He's also deflecting, she added, which was fair. Naruto tugged the towel off his neck and folded it, careful with the edges. Last night was complicated. That's one word, Sasuke said. What's yours? Naruto asked. Sasuke's mouth made a shape like he'd say useless and then changed its mind. Irrelevant to the next 5 minutes. Naruto smiled. We'll make them relevant. Kakashi arrived like a rumor that got tired of being almost true and became a person out of stubbornness. He materialized at the top of the post, book in hand, leaned into the casual pose like a cat in a sun patch, and took them in with one lazy sweep. So, he said, you're loud, you're pink, and you're complicated. Sakura bristled. Naruto laughed. Sasuke's eyebrow rose with aristocratic disdain. Kakashi hopped down. No dust puffed. He walked past them, dropped a lunch box on a stump with ceremonial gravity, and held up 2 silver bells. Take these from me before noon, he said, or some. One skips lunch and someone goes back to the academy. You can try alone and starve together, or you can try together and still probably starve, but with company. That sounds like a life lesson wrapped around bullying, Naruto observed. Most life lessons are, Kakashi agreed. He set a clock on a rock. It ticked in the loud way quiet spaces made clocks tick. Naruto felt the sensation again, the eye. Are admitting the threads a person could pluck if they wanted to cheat. He let the threads hum and didn't touch them. Ready, Kakashi said, and the word had barely cleared his mask before he was gone. Sakura vanished into the scrub with reassuring competence. Sasuke ghosted left. Naruto didn't vanish. He walked into the open and let the training ground see him. Kakashi arrived behind him, quiet as old dust. A hand came for Naruto's collar like picking up a kitten. Naruto moved, not away, but in a half-step that made the wrist overshoot. He flicked his knuckles against a tendon where the sleeve creased. The hand withdrew, amused. Interesting, Kakashi said. Who taught you to watch for breath ticks? Anko taught me to steal dango from someone not looking directly at it, Naruto said. Does that count? Kakashi turned a page. We'll call it transferable skills. The first exchange was simple. Kakashi tested with a sweep that had no edge on it. Naruto met it with a body that had finally discovered it didn't have to be a fist to be effective. He let Kakashi's momentum roll past and tapped the ground with his heel in a way that made the dirt a touch firmer in one place than another, enough to make balance disagree. Kakashi corrected without thinking. Naruto learned that correction. Second exchange. Clones. Naruto didn't flood the field. He made exactly 4. 2 for noise, 1 for angle, 1 for honesty. Kakashi dispelled the first 2 like swatting flies and caught the third with a lazy choke that wasn't lazy at all. The fourth touched a branch and asked the branch to hold a little differently. Kakashi's foot hit it. He hummed, appreciative, when the branch went with the clone instead of him, just long enough for a hand to brush a bell and not take it. Sasuke arrived out of shadow and threw a feint so beautiful Naruto wanted to clap. Sakura landed a flash bang that turned the air white and mean. When the light cleared, Kakashi stood where the lunch box had been, one bell still on its cord. The second in his book hand. He didn't look winded. He looked entertained in a way that was half warning. Better, he said. Naruto rubbed the ache in his eyes with the heel of his palm and felt Kakashi notice the gesture. What's the cost? Kakashi asked softly, not for the others, for him. Naruto considered deflecting. He could hear Iruka somewhere in his head. You can dodge a kunai, some questions. You answer or they cut you later. They make everything look like solutions, Naruto said. Including people. Kakashi's visible eye thinned with understanding that hurt more than pity would have. Then fix your settings. Working on it, Naruto said. Kakashi vanished. He reappeared at the edge of the river, book gone, hands in pockets like a man about to be inconvenient for a good cause. Sasuke went at him, blade sharp. Naruto followed not to flank so much as to change the ground under the idea of flanking. Sakura's wire sang, thin, precise. Naruto tugged on a thread. That wasn't wire and made a sapling lean a whispered degree, enough to turn an elegant dodge into a shoulder check. Kakashi slid off it anyway and planted Sasuke face first with professional courtesy. Sakura took the opening to rush the bells. Kakashi let her get a finger on one and then laid 2 fingers on the back of her hand, and she stopped because her body had learned the voice of someone who could break it and didn't. Naruto didn't like watching anyone's body be spoken to that way when they hadn't consented. The calm in him offered angles that ended things now. He ignored them. He threw A clone at Kakashi's face with none of the flourish he usually used. It existed to be there and gone. Kakashi reflexively batted it aside, and in that blink Naruto closed and put his back to Sakura, not to hide her so much as to force Kakashi to choose between taking space and taking them both. What? Kakashi asked politely, are you doing? Learning to be furniture, Naruto said. Very heavy furniture. Sakura, startled, started laughing under her breath and then turned it into a cough because battle etiquette. Take the bell, Naruto said quietly, and meant it, and hated that he meant it, because he wanted it too. If only one of us eats today, it's you. Absolutely not, Sakura said, and her voice had a spine he liked. Sasuke, who had disentangled himself with the dignity of a cat falling off a fence, appeared on Kakashi's other side and said, give it to me. I'll eat for both of you. Generous, Naruto said. Efficient, Sasuke corrected. Kakashi looked between them and sighed. Like a man witnessing a street show 12 minutes before he wanted to. You can fight me for it, he offered. Naruto shook his head. You'll win. And we'll learn the wrong thing. Kakashi's stance didn't change, but the attention did. The way a room's air changes when someone puts down a glass and leans forward in a conversation that matters. Say the right thing, then, he said. Bells are bait, Naruto said. The real test is whether we make each other better or hungrier. Sasuke's eyes did a small, involuntary flick that admitted this made sense. Sakura's shoulders straightened like a measurement had been taken and she'd passed. Eat together, Naruto said. Or starve together. The point isn't lunch. Kakashi watched them do the math. Sakura pulled her hand away from the bell. Sasuke CKED off a half-step that felt like an agreement more than a retreat. Naruto unclenched something he hadn't realized he was clenching. Sit, Kakashi said, and their bodies obeyed before their brains caught up. He put the bells away. He opened the lunch box and placed 3 rice balls on the stump. I'm going to go over there and read for exactly 5 minutes, and if any of you feed the others, I will appear behind you and make your life a uniquely flavored hell. He vanished. They stared at the food as if it might explode. Naruto stared like a man memorizing a crime. Sakura picked one up, handed it to Sasuke like handing a weapon, and then shoved half of another into Naruto's mouth while glaring at the space where Kakashi had been. If you're going to punish anyone for kindness, she told the empty air, punish me. Naruto chewed, surprised laughter trying to get past the rice. Sasuke looked appalled and impressed in equal parts. Kakashi reappeared behind Sakura and tapped her shoulder with a finger that did not hurt. Pass, he said. Sakura blinked. What? Teamwork, Kakashi said. Courage. Defiance with acceptable aim. He pulled his Hitai down and looked at Naruto directly. Close up. The old scar along his face made a different kind of map. And restraint, he added. Rare is a good book in a bad war. Naruto didn't look away. I'm practicing. Keep practicing, Kakashi said. The way you move, someone will try to convince you that speed is the same as right. It isn't. The words landed like stones in a river, and the current moved around them because it had no choice. Kakashi let the moment dissolve. He clapped once. Meet me tomorrow. Same place. Don't be late, or be late in a way that improves the story. He disappeared with the grace of a man leaving before gratitude made anyone weird. Sakura exhaled like someone who'd held her breath as a lifestyle. We passed, she said, then more softly, to herself, we passed. Sasuke leaned on a post and pretended he hadn't enjoyed any of it. You fight like you're asking permission from the ground. Naruto grinned. Sometimes it says yes. Sakura's gaze flicked to his eyes again. She didn't comment. Instia. What are we going to do about the thing no one is talking about? Which thing? Naruto asked. The men with the beads, she said, surprising him. I saw one this morning, by the East Market. I thought it was just, a festival thing. But he was watching alleys instead of lanterns. Naruto's mouth went dry. The towel around his neck suddenly felt like a flag. He glanced at Sasuke. The Uchiha's face stayed bland. His eyes said he'd seen them too. We tell someone who stabs first and argues later, Naruto said. Anko, Sasuke suggested, with the faintest curl of a smile, like naming a force of nature. Anko, Naruto agreed. They found her exactly where they always found her when she wanted to be found. On a fence she wasn't supposed to sit on, eating something sticky and sharp. Mirrors, she said before they asked. Heard, I'm already ruining a few shopping lists. You three keep your heads down and your backs up. Sun prayer types get brave when they think they're the only ones who know the rules. Who are they? Sakura asked. People who love a clean world and think bleach fixes souls, Enko said, wiped sauce on a napkin, and missed. If they come near you with glass, yell. If they come near you without it, yell louder. Specific, Sasuke muttered. Specific enough, she said. Her gaze found Naruto's eyes, and for once, she didn't make a joke. If you feel a tug, don't follow it. I wasn't going to, Naruto said. Good, she said, because the tug wants to be you when it grows up. Naruto grimaced. That's a messed up sentence. Enko bared her teeth. The world is a messed up teacher. You've got friends. That's extra credit. They drifted apart because afternoons demand it. Errands, home, the ordinary gravity of a day pulling people in different orbits. Naruto climbed again at dusk. The village spread under him like a handful of stories. Smoke rose from kitchens. A boy failed a cartwheel in a yard and swore in a whisper and tried again. A woman threw chair on her steps with the technique of a mid-level jonin. He sat on the edge and let the ache behind his eyes settle like a coin in a jar. Hey, a voice called softly from below. Hinata stood in the lane, waving like she was apologizing to the air for interrupting it. Training again. Always, he said, hopping down to the fence and then to the street. She handed him a paper bag. It held onigiri shaped wrong but perfect. I made too many. He took one and bit it and made the exaggerated appreciative face of a man trying to raise the self-esteem of a rice ball. Hinata laughed, embarrassed and happy, and rolled her eyes at herself. They walked. No destination, just streets becoming thread under their feet. She told him about an old woman who insisted on paying for cabbage with buttons. He told her about Kakashi reading in a fight like the book might throw a punch if insulted. Their shoulders brushed without trying to. At a corner, Hinata paused. Be careful, she said. I am, he said, and then decided to be honest. I will be better. She looked up, met his eyes, and didn't flinch. You already are. He wanted to make a joke. He didn't. He let the words stay a while. After she left, he cut through the East Market just to see if the world looked different when he looked for sunbeds. It did. You notice what you name. He saw none. He did see a man standing too still by a stall selling glassware. The man did not move when people bumped him. He did not turn when a child ran past laughing. Naruto edged closer, casual, picked up a cheap mirror, tilted it. The man's reflection showed for a second, and in it, the man's wrist wore beads that reality refused to render until the angle was exact. The little suns flickered like an old candle. Naruto set the mirror down. He did not touch a thread. He did not make the air heavier. He looked at the man's face and gave him a smile so bland it could have been a mistake. The man's eyes went over Naruto like rain. They didn't stop for long. When they did, something in Naruto's chest changed temperature. He walked away with his hands in his pockets because boys with knives in their eyes don't run, and turned exactly twice more than a boy with nothing on his mind would have. By the time he reached the corner, the man was gone. The stall keeper complained to no one about how no one ever buys mirrors in this rain. Naruto went home without detours. He shut the door and leaned his head against it until the wood cooled his forehead. He peeled off his sandals and stared at the ceiling as if there'd be writing on it this time. There wasn't. He lay down. The quiet pressed at him like a hand testing a bruise. He breathed until his lungs found an even way to do the work. He let the tug in him pull and then didn't answer it. When sleep came, it brought the sea again. Something old moved under it, patient and curious. It wasn't a voice. It was an appetite with manners. It approached like a tide and waited where the surf thins. Naruto stood on the shore in the dream and made a circle in the wet sand with his foot. He didn't step over it. The water reached, retreated, and reached again. I'm not alone, he said to the dark, because the dark had ears. Names. Hands. The tide paused, as if considering terms. When he woke, dawn had lit the mountain faces like a promise. He rubbed grit from his eyes and found the ache bearable. He stretched until his shoulders popped like knuckles. He put his feet on the floor and felt the day meet them with the weight of a village that would ask a lot and give some of it back. On the roof, the air tasted clean. He looked east, and the line of light cut the horizon into before and after. He stepped toward the day like a man who had decided which kind of shinobi lives longer. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Teeth in the Forest. The fence looked like a joke until you stood under it. 30 feet of wire and signs, a gate with teeth, a breeze that came out of the trees smelling like wet leather and old secrets. The proctor chewed a stick of something with far too much enthusiasm and flicked a glance across the gathered genin like a card shark checking marks. Enko smirked around the toothpick. Welcome to the Forest of Death. If you're worried about the name, you have good instincts. If you're not worried, the forest will improve you. Sakura's eyes were bright and steady. Sasuke rolled his shoulders. Naruto flexed his hand and felt the invisible lines in the ground admit they existed. The forest breathed. Cicadas drilled. Then, under the noise, something else pressed in, the smallest hush. Like a room holding its breath when a teacher pauses before asking for volunteers. Anko snapped her clipboard shut. Scrolls. One heaven, one earth. You bring me both in 72 hours and something that looks like a team. You pass. Otherwise you don't. Sign your waivers. Don't die stupid. They moved through bureaucracy like shinobi do. Quickly, bored, already watching exits. A kid in a too-clean headband cracked a joke. Anko's hand moved and a kunai pinned the joke to the signpost by his ear. The laughter that followed had the mean edge of relief. By the time the gate rattled up, the sky had settled into a thick gray that made light behave. Teams scattered with all the grace of cats released into a room with 2 mice and 1 high shelf. Left, Naruto said, not loudly, and Sasuke went that way because he would have anyway. Sakura ghosted right and came back in with wire already in her hands, looping it into a loose figure 8 as they ran. They crossed the first 100 meters like they'd trained together longer than a day. Sasuke used elevation. Sakura used sightlines. Naruto used ground. He knocked his heel lightly against a root and the pressure there shifted a hair. He memorized the feel and the answer the earth gave him. The eyes didn't need a name to be useful. They had a scroll by mid-afternoon. Not because they were faster. Because they were hungrier in the right way. A 2-man team from grass tried a cheap flank, and Naruto let them finish the mistake. Sakura's wire breathed and whispered, and suddenly the tree that had been a tree a second ago was a question about angles and the body. Sasuke answered with a sweep that took breath but not bone. Naruto touched 2 points in the larger boy's stance and the kid found himself sitting with exquisite confusion. Thanks. Naruto panted as he plucked the scroll from the pouch. We'll return it if we don't open it. That's not how this works, the kid said, dazed. Better outcome for everyone, Akura said and tied him neatly to the tree he'd previously trusted. They moved deeper. The light thinned. The forest changed the way rooms change when you blow out 1 candle too many. Sasuke slowed without being told. Sakura's wire went slack in her hands, ready. Naruto felt the pressure before he heard it. Stop, he said. Sasuke froze. Sakura stopped mid-step, foot hovering. What? Sasuke asked. His voice came out smaller than he meant. The tree's flattened sound. It didn't quite echo. It folded. Naruto swallowed. The hair along his arms stood up because some part of him respected competence when he met it. The air here had had something woven through it, a lattice he couldn't see until his eyes shifted and the world admitted it. Threads, yes, but not the friendly kind. These lines were straight and bright and uninterested in his preferences. Beads hung where branches forked, tiny and dull in the light, stamped with that child's simple sun. Mirrors, Sakura murmured. No, Naruto said. Cage. Sasuke tilted his head, very slight. We can cut it. Yeah, Naruto said, and he could have said more, about how cutting the wrong bead would cinch the lattice tight, how the silence wasn't natural. How the ground was admitting less than it had a minute ago, but he didn't, because the forest had gone from listening to looking. The first hunter appeared the way a patient idea comes to you all at once. He wore gray, nothing to shine, a girl with a shaved head and bare arms, prayer beads looped twice around 1 wrist. Her smile was neat and careful. Hello, she said. Naruto Uzumaki, I'm Sister KO. I'd like you to come with us. Sasuke stepped into the path between Naruto and the voice without thinking. Sakura's wire lifted a hair. I'm busy, Naruto said, and even he heard the brittle joke in it. The hush pressed his words flat. KO glanced at Sasuke with friendly curiosity and at Sakura with professional respect. I like teams, she said. When they get older, I like them even better. Your village is good at keeping children alive. I would like to keep them that way. The eyes in him, she tipped her chin toward Naruto like a greeting, will make keeping him alive harder. You've got a fix? Naruto asked. Let me guess. Involves a lot of light and not much consent. Her smile didn't change. She gestured lightly. More gray slipped out of the underbrush like thoughts you almost had. 4, 6. Naruto counted shapes by how the soundlessness bent around them. 7. One behind them, in the trees, patient as a cat. Don't, Naruto told himself, and felt the calm. Like a tool he didn't have to love to use. The lattice tightened. Sound shrank to what mouths made. Chakra trickled. When Naruto reached for clones, the air ate half the shape before it formed. The eyes answered by taking the field apart instead of adding to it. He let them. He didn't cast anything. He pulled. A thumbprint's worth of space, then two, then a palm-sized well where the lattice had less authority. Null tide. It wasn't a technique so much as a decision to make room where there wasn't any. He slid that pocket toward Sakura, and breath returned to her face in a tiny change, eyes widening, wire relaxing a hair. He made another for Sasuke, then one small one to breathe in himself. KO watched all that like a teacher pleased with a student's choices. Good, she said softly. It's better when you cooperate. Naruto smiled with his teeth. You're welcome to my cooperation after you stop trying to steal me at knife point. Steal, she repeated, patient. No, remove. We remove plagues from the body. It screams for a while. Then it heals. Sasuke's fingers flexed, an Uchiha flicker ready and coiled. Sakura's wire whispered in a language only experienced hands speak. Naruto and a fraction into the pressure and saw where it wanted him weak. He took the weakness, turned it, and threw it at the nearest hunter. He didn't move his feet much. He didn't have to. He made a pocket at the guy's knee. A whisper of gravity where the man didn't expect to put weight. The hunter stepped into a stumble he hadn't planned. Sakura's wire met the timing with soft brutality and introduced a branch to a neck with the right amount of respect. The hunter slept, surprised to find himself gently arranged. The hush snapped tight in response. KO's smile sharpened. Do not. She lifted her beads. Make this difficult. Naruto saw the pattern then. The beads weren't talismans, they were anchors. Each bead sang to the others at a pitch just past what ears like his liked. The lattice held because the beads had agreed to hold. Break a consensus, break the field. He pointed with his chin, the smallest show, and Sasuke understood sooner than Naruto could have explained. Shuriken flashed. Not at KO, but at the dull little beads at the crotch of branches. Two shattered. The air gasped in a way that wasn't a sound so much as the memory of one. KO moved, finally. She flowed like one who had learned the value of precision standing next to the cost of haste. Her hand blurred, and a sigil slapped against a trunk and stuck. The lattice cinched with a jerk that made Naruto's eyes throb. Sakura swore under her breath and countered. Wire singing, a tiny tug, a bead popped off its line and fell into her palm. And then the trees split with a sound like a joke that went too far, and a snake the size of a house slid through the brush. Its scales took light into themselves. It opened a mouth and night lived there. It knocked one of the tribunal hunters through a sapling without caring about sides. A figure in a grass forehead protector stood on its head with the kind of balance that makes a mockery of gravity. The hush field ate the serpent's sound, so the effect was of a monster arriving on mute. The grass nin grinned like a mask being nothing but itself. Good afternoon, he said in a voice like oil. What an interesting net. Sister KO's eyes cooled. Leave, interloper. Oh, the grass nin said pleasantly. But your parties are so lively. Orochimaru turned his head and looked straight at Naruto. Not at the eyes exactly, at the space behind them. Naruto's calm of, fared a path. Nip the edges of whatever this was, take a bite at the seams, make the monster blink. He took the path halfway and then chose where to stop. Uchiha, Orochimaru said as if tasting tea. Uzumaki. And, potential. Sasuke drew breath through his teeth. Naruto didn't glance at him. He let the null-tied pockets breathe for the three of them and dug for a different answer. Ko flicked her beads. The snake hissed. Not a sound. Precisely, but a vibration that made the bones in Naruto's forearms complain. The lattice bucked. The snake's head knocked into it as if into glass, and Orochimaru swayed, delighted. This, he declared, is craftsmanship. He made a seal with one hand, lazy. The snake peeled another skin off itself with the repulsive grace of a man removing a glove with his teeth. The shed slid through the lattice, leaving the bulk of the serpent outside. The skin, not a skin, not exactly, a chakra echo given the courtesy of form, coiled toward Naruto. He didn't wait for it to reach him. He met it like a man tapping a drum to decide if it was tuned. The third maw opened in him with a relieving ache, like an old door giving. He let it take a mouthful of the echo, not all. Not even most. Just enough that the shed structure remembered what it felt like to be interrupted and did the rest himself. It sagged. He brushed it with a kunai and it came apart like wet paper. Orochimaru's grin widened. Interesting. He purred, the word itself a finger across the back of Naruto's neck. A nibbler. How rare. Naruto's mouth went dry. He heard Hinata's voice in memory, steady. As the breath she'd taught him to count. Don't let the eyes choose for you. Busy, he said to the man on the snake. Come back never. Ko snapped a palm-sized mirror open and the lattice sang through it. Light collected where there hadn't been any. The air sharpened. Naruto tasted metal and oranges in a temple somewhere high. Move, he told his body, and it did. He threw a pocket of null tid into the mirror's face and the light mangled, enough to stop it becoming a spear. The mirror cracked along a ray line's stamp. Ko's calm never broke. Take him, she told her people. I will handle the snake. That would have been noble if it hadn't made Naruto's back feel cold. Sasuke went through 2 hunters in a breath, not killing, but leaving behind mess that would require forms. Sakura D something elegant with wire and a root that turned a charging man into a gift for the ground. Naruto took the third with a move that used both hands and none of the eyes, shoulder to hip, the way Anko had shown him. Ending with someone safely unconscious and his own heart hating how easy that was. The fourth hunter had patience. He'd been behind them the whole time, waiting, letting the lattice press them toward his quiet. Naruto knew he was there because the hush made him too neat a space among the mess. He turned. Too late for cleverness, just in time for honesty, and took the rush square on. They went down. Naruto's shoulder sang. A knife kissed his ribs, then apologized. He grabbed the man's bead wrist and didn't twist. He held it in a grip that said, let go or I'll break something complicated and annoying to heal. The man let go. Naruto flung the beads toward Sasuke without looking. Sasuke, offended by the lack of respect and pleased by the trust, snatched them out of the air and lunged them at a very specific branch crotch. The lattice bucked. Sound fell back into the world like rain retaking a roof. Every tree creaked. Birds swore creative things. Anko arrived on the back of T. He snake corpse like a punchline nobody wanted. She landed next to Naruto without ceremony, blood on her sleeve, eyes bright. Field trip, she said cheerfully. Everyone brought their permission slips. Orochimaru's tongue did something anatomically rude and he smiled down at her with an intimacy that made the air colder. Anko-chan. Anko didn't blink. Die tired, sensei. She flicked knives. 2, 4, 6, faster than the eye. Each not at a person but at a corner of the lattice Naruto hadn't named out loud. The knives carried little paper tabs that sizzled on impact. The beads on the tree line went dark in a ripple. Ko placed her broken mirror back into her sleeve with the care you give anything that might cut you in transit. She inclined her head at Anko, respect neat and sharp. You're far from your office. I hate paperwork, Anko said. And pilgrims. Ko's smile turned sad around the edges. We hate funerals. Then stop making them, Anko snapped. Orochimaru clapped, once. It was almost soundless. You children can keep your argument. I came for a simple conversation with a boy who speaks the language of edges. Naruto didn't move closer or farther. I'm busy learning not to. Shame, Orochimaru said. He leaned, just a hair, and the snake's real body outside the lattice flexed like the word appetite. The world rewards efficiency. Come find me when it disappoints you. He shed again. The echo slipped through the places the lattice still thought it had power. He left like a taste you try to wash off and can't. The real snake thrashed in frustration and split a cedar like an old debt being collected. Ko gave one short, precise set of orders without raising her voice. Her hunters obeyed with the relief of people who had nearly been close to something beyond their training. The lattice unspooled under her hands with tight competence. She took in Anko, the broken beads at the forest's feet, Sasuke's ready stance, Sakura's wire, and Naruto's eyes. Next time, she told Naruto. Tone almost warm with apology he didn't trust, we bring sunlight. Bring lunch, Naruto said, because his mouth needed to be busy. Ko looked amused in a way that said she didn't want to be. She touched 2 fingers briefly to the stamp on her beads and withdrew her people with a quiet that would have been impossible a minute ago. The forest exhaled. Naruto's hand started hawking as if the tremor had been waiting in a coat room with his name on it. He put them against the bark of the nearest tree and let the roughness rub some of the invisible off his skin. Anko did a brisk inventory of them with her eyes. Bleeding. Not much, Sakura said, already moving toward Naruto with gauze. Hungry, Anko added. Yes, Naruto and Sasuke said in the same tone, which was the first time that had happened. Anko shoved a wrapped rice ball at each of them. Good job not dying stupid. Good job making it expensive to make you die at all. She flicked Naruto's towel where it had become a habit again around his neck. Grounding. He nodded. Helps. Keep it, she said. She snapped a twig off a low branch, twirled it in her teeth like a bad habit, and spit it toward the broken bead nest. Radiant lattice, she added for Sakura's benefit. Pretty. Fragile if you're mean to the right part. I noticed, Sakura said, voice dry with relief. Sasuke wiped his blade and pretend. He didn't notice his hand was a fraction less steady than usual. The woman, Ko, fights like she's filling out forms. Dangerous people, Anko said. Never underestimate a neat desk. Naruto sat on a fallen trunk and let his body remember it had bones in it. The calm still lay under everything, humming, but it had the decency to leave room for other feelings. Fear, yes. Pride, a little. Annoyance with himself for how good it had felt to bite the edge of that shed snake skin and how the wanting had kicked like a horse then faded when Hinata's voice had turned up in his memory like a hand on his wrist. He closed his eyes for a second and breathed. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. The air didn't taste like oranges anymore. It tasted like dirt and leaves and the leftover copper of adrenaline. Good tastes. Human. Sakura dabbed at his side. You'll bruise. It'll complain about weather like an old man. Great, he said. I've always wanted to be meteorologically relevant. Sasuke ate a small noise that might have been a laugh and might have been a cough. We still need the second scroll, Sakura reminded, and the world snapped back into the proper shape of problem solving. They moved. Not fast. Smarter. Naruto let the ground back under his feet. He asked it to be kind in the small ways. No treacherous mud when a heel needed a friend, no conveniently placed holes where an ankle would go. The ground did not love him. It accepted his arguments. They skirted a clearing where 2 teams from Rain had decided to argue with traps. They avoided a path that smelled like iron and regret. They found a tree whose roots wanted to tell a story. Naruto listened, nudged, and a hidden pit sighed open. Not dangerous, just rude. Sasuke rolled his eyes and jumped it like a man insulted by engineering. By dusk, they had their second scroll. It wasn't tidy. A sound trio pushed them harder than the grass kids had. Sakura had to make a choice between catching a falling teammate and bagging a prize. She chose right and Naruto felt something tighten and then relax in his chest at seeing it. They made camp the way shinobi do. A fire that didn't look like one, a lean-to that had an opinion about rain. Watches divided like they trusted each other's eyes. Naruto took second watch. The forest made night noises, happy to have its hush back to itself. He rolled the beads Ko's man had dropped between thumb and finger. The little sun stamp had a crack through one ray. He rubbed it until he could feel the hairline with his nail. You kept a souvenir, Sasuke said from the edge of sleep. I'm practicing, Naruto said. On what? Sasuke asked, not mocking, genuinely curious. On not becoming the kind of person who thinks problems are prettier than people, Naruto said, and heard how it sounded and didn't flinch. Sasuke, awake now, sat up. He looked at the bead, at Naruto's face, at the dark. The man on the snake, he said, like checking if he'd imagined it. He wanted me. He wanted both of us, Naruto said. Differently. Sasuke huffed. Everyone does. Naruto smiled. Small, arrogant, relevant. Sasuke corrected. They were quiet. The bead clicked softly between Naruto's fingers, a pebble in a stream. Sasuke lay back down. You fight like you think the world is a device. It is, Naruto said. And a person. That's confusing. I'm learning not to make it simpler than it is. Sasuke made an approving sound that he would deny in daylight. The night stayed itself. Somewhere a fox objected to an owl. Somewhere a hunter dreamed in a language of light. Naruto kept watch and let the calm be a tool on the bench instead of a hand around his throat. When dawn came, it came honestly, smuggling birdsong in its pockets. They broke camp and moved like a team that had itself in a mirror and decided to look how it looked on purpose. Near noon, the trees thinned. The fence appeared where it had been all along, waiting. Enko perched on the gate's crossbeam with a CUP of something steaming and an expression like a cat watching people carry grocery bags. You're alive, she announced. You brought friends. And souvenirs. Her eyes landed on the bead in Naruto's hand and narrowed for a beat before she grinned. Nice crack. Thanks, Naruto said, because he didn't know where else to put the weird mix of gratitude and irritation he felt for having been hunted and helped in the same hour. Enko slid down and took their scrolls, checked seals, nodded, and stuffed everything into a bag that had seen worse. She tipped her chin toward the tower beyond. Rest, eat, don't poke any mirrors. Wouldn't dream of it, Naruto said. Dream of something better. Enko shot back, and then, softer so only he heard it, good choice in there. He didn't ask which one. He knew. They walked toward the tower. The path up was ugly and practical. Naruto liked it. The eyes ached in that old new way, and he rubbed them with the heel of his palm. Sakura's glance flicked to the gesture and away. Sasuke pretended not to notice. At the top of the stairs, they stopped. Not because anyone told them to. Because the sky had a position Naruto liked, a thin blue blade through cloud, a strip of honesty. He drew in a breath and let it out slow. He felt the tug inside him reach, and he didn't follow. Behind them, the forest went on breathing. Somewhere in it, a woman in gray knelt among broken beads and traced a crack with her thumb until she remembered what it felt like. She stood, slid the beads back on her wrist, and looked east. Sunlight, she said, as if telling the day a secret. Naruto flexed his hand once, let his fingers uncurl, and followed his team into the tower. Chapter 2, Part 1, End. The tower didn't try to be welcoming. Bare concrete, stairs that believed in work, walls that held echoes like grudges. The proctor at the check-in desk stamped their forearms with ink that smelled medicinal and approval that didn't. Room 308, she said without looking up. Don't bleed on the mattress. Quote, Kakashi knocked once and let himself in anyway. He took them in the way he took everything in, sideways, like a magician checking the audience for plants. He didn't ask how they were. He counted the answer in the dirt on their knees and the way they stood. You met somebody organized, he said finally. 7 somebodies, Naruto said, and held up the bead he'd kept. Plus 1 old snake. Kakashi turned the bead between 2 gloved fingers. The tiny sun rays caught the light and looked like nothing until they didn't. He hummed. Radiant lattice. You've seen it? Sakura asked. Kakashi palmed the bead back to Naruto like a coin trick. Enough to know you broke it without breaking each other. Eat, sleep, and next time you see a mirror in the woods, throw a rock before you look into it. I'll throw Sasuke, Naruto said. Efficient, Sasuke said, deadpan. Kakashi's eye smiled at them the way a teacher does when his class insists on being tolerable. He turned to go, then paused in the doorway. Naruto, Kakashi's voice dropped, soft enough the hallway wouldn't steal it. Those eyes aren't a favor the world did you. Make them behave. Naruto nodded once. I'm trying. Practice when no one's aiming at your throat, Kakashi said, and left before anyone could make thanks awkward. They ate like people being paid for it and slept like people. Who hadn't known their bodies were a collection of pulleys and strings until the pulleys squeaked? Naruto woke before the bell, not with a start but with the quiet arrival of a thought he'd left on the table. He slid out of bed. The concrete was cold enough to make his soles hiss. The corridor smelled faintly of tea and steel. Someone coughed 2 doors down with the dogged rhythm of a man pretending not to be ill. He padded to the end of the hall and found the emergency stairs. They climbed without pretense to a hatch and a roof that liked rain. The sky had been scrubbed until it was thin. The city laid its bones out clean. Roofs, alleys, the black stripe of the river. Naruto stood with his hands on the railing and tried the breath Hinata had taught him. In, count the room you take up. Out, count what you can bear to lay down. Too early, a voice asked behind him. Careful. He didn't turn fast. Not if you brought food, he said, and grinned as Hinata produced 2 rice balls wrapped in questionable plastic. The kitchen was busy, she confessed, like she'd stolen fire. He took one and ate like a parade marching. The ache behind his eyes settled at the taste. Salt, vinegar, the stubbornness of rice. Hinata watched him, relaxed in the way of someone who'd decided observation wasn't intrusive if you were gentle with it. How are you? She asked. Worse than yesterday, he said. Better than the day after. When she tilted her head, he added, I learned something about what not to do. That always feels like failure first. What not to do? Let the easy answers drive. He tapped his temple. It's dumb how good efficiency feels. Hinata's smile went small and fierce. It's not dumb. It's dangerous. He made a face. You say that like it's a compliment. It is, she said. You're not pretending not to notice. Quote. They stood. He told her about the hush, how the air had folded on itself. She showed him how her Byakugan had seen it like a net dragged over a pond. He let R touch his wrist again. Same spot as last time, same pressure, as she counted his pulse through the breaths. You built little rooms, she said, impressed. Null zones, pocket doors, he said. And then I locked them from the inside. She considered. Make one now. He breathed, found the edge of the world's insistence, and pressed. The air softened in a circle, the size of a hat, then a bowl, smaller now than yesterday. Because he'd slept and because the roof liked him less than the forest. Hinata stepped into it like stepping into warm water. Her shoulders went down a fraction. This is good, she said. But don't stay in here too long. Why? He asked, though he knew. Because rooms are for resting, she said. Not living. He let the pocket go. The roof took its gravity back with a C. You only heard if you'd been listening for it. A bell clanged inside the tower, calling Genin to gather. They traded a look that felt like a plan and went. The arena was a bowl of tired stone and hungry eyes. Proctors lined the rail. Medics pretended to organize bandages while counting candidates who looked like problems. The Hokage stood above with his hat like a mountain that had politely asked to be invited indoors. Every village had brought some version of its pride. Every pride had brought some version of its problem. Hiruzen's voice floated down calm as weather. Too many of you survived. We'll fix that with preliminaries. He smiled the old man smile that said he'd used that joke 30 times and it had worked 29. Raise your hand if you wish to withdraw. No one did at first. Then one boy raised his hand as if it were tipping a hat. No one jeered. You don't mock a man who has taken a measure of himself that you haven't. The proctors made notes. The crowd adjusted its appetite. Enko stalked in late with a folder and a stick of something chewed to rags. Rules, she asked the room. Hit each other until one of you can't, someone offered. Traditionally, Enko said, we prefer a display of skill, restraint, and the good kind of cruelty. Try not to traumatize the building. The board flickered names. Naruto read them without hoping. Hope gets you interesting opponents. Resignation gets you whatever the board wants to teach. The first bout snapped the room awake. A sand genin with hands like knives against a cloud kid whose lightning came mean and bright. It went 3 exchanges before the sandboy leveraged the floor itself and turned the lightning into a problem for the walls. Crowd screamed. Proctors wrote. The Cloud Kid bowed like he'd learned Someth. Ing and left like he meant to live long enough to use it. Second. Third. The prelims ate time with the delicate manners of a starving man eating cake. Uzumaki Naruto vs Tsubasa Ren, the board said, as if it had been planning this. Ren stepped down from the far side with sure-footed grace. Hidden Rain. Tall. Mask off. Eyes polite. The cloth at his wrists had the slight stiffness of paper. Yuto's eyes didn't need to be special to like him. You can respect a man who looks like he knows how to fold a bird that cuts you. Good luck, Ren said, like offering a drink. You too, Naruto said, like making a promise. Begin, the proctor said. Ren moved the way rain does when it decides to be something else. The paper on his wrists unfurled with a dry talk. It laced the air into crisp angles, it snapped tight into blades. He offered Naruto 3 shapes in quick succession. A slash at ribs, a sweep at ankles, a veer toward throat. Naruto stepped through the first, over the second, under the third. And Ren's eyes sharpened to something like joy. Paper snapped. Naruto listened. He heard where Ren's chakra hummed along the folded fibers, where it wanted to hold, where it tired. He didn't reach for claws. He took breath and built a pocket the size of a palm around a knot in Ren's pattern, null-tied, and pressed it just enough to make the paper forget why it was so sharp. Ren adjusted without panic. He changed his fingers, changed the fold, changed the song. Paper birds spun lazy around Naruto's head and then went beaks out for his ears. Naruto laughed despite himself and ducked. He didn't use clones. He didn't need noise. He needed angles. He stepped past a blade, let it comb his hair wrong, and tapped Ren's forearm where the tendon met bone. The paper hiccuped. Naruto slid in like a suggestion becoming a plan, hooked his calf behind Ren's, and laid him down with the kind of kindness that leaves a bruise. Ren rolled back up, cheek flushed, grinning now. Again, Naruto said, happy in a way he only was when a fight tried to be a conversation and succeeded. The second exchange went longer. Ren feinted a cut and actually drew blood with a paper sting at Naruto's wrist. Naruto let the sting talk to him. He used it to find where Ren had left a tiny sloppy seam in the next fold and flicked it, and the paper bit itself. They broke apart. One breath came in, and then Naruto did something he wouldn't have done 2 days ago. He didn't take the narrow straight when the calm offered. He took a crooked path that made room for Ren to see it. He threw a pocket of null-tid. Not at Ren's hands but at the space between them, and when the paper stuttered he reached in and took Ren's wrist, not hard, but like a teacher moving a chopstick into a better grip. Ren blinked, startled, then, miraculously in this room, at this hour, laughed. He yielded with a twist and a bow. I see it, he said. Thank you. Naruto let go and stepped back. The proctor waited a fraction to see if anyone wanted to start a riot and then raised a hand. Uzumaki advances. The room's noise bent around them. Not cheers. Not boos. Interest. That was more dangerous and more valuable than applause. On the balcony above, a woman with shaved hair and neat eyes leaned on a rail and watched the boy with the dragon in his gaze choose to be human. She turned the beads at her wrist once, soft, and did not frown. Enko drifted to Naruto's shoulder as he climbed out of the ring like smoke with opinions. You didn't go for the throat, she said. Thought about it, he admitted. Good, she said, and handed him a little paper packet. Pineapple candy. Don't tell anyone or they'll think I like you. He popped one in his mouth and winced at the sour. Ow, exactly, she said, satisfied. Now go watch your friends. Sasuke fought like the blade you make when you're tired of being the problem and want to be the solution. He dismantled a sound genin with a proficiency that made the medics lean forward. Then stepped away before finishing clean because finishing clean would have meant damage that took, and he was not in the mood to give, not yet. The proctor marked it a win. The room reset its opinion of what genin meant. Sakura drew a kunoichi from mist whose water made hands out of puddles and a face out of spray. Sakura used wire and timing and a throw Kakashi had shown them an hour ago on a napkin. And when it worked she looked delighted enough to trip. She recovered, bowed. The mist girl grinned and stuck out her tongue and promised to drink with Sakura after they were both promoted and had terrible taste. Between bouts, Naruto felt the tug. It didn't come from the ring. It didn't come from Orochimaru, thank whatever gods listen to fools. It came from the upper tier where the observers stood too still or too polite. He didn't look. He let the feeling brush him and run off like a cat you don't reach for. Beads clicked very faintly. He smiled without teeth. Don't, he told himself. And the word had room inside it now for breath. By late afternoon, the bowl had its blood quota. The proctor waved off the last match like ending a song before the singer broke. The Hokage spoke the formal words that made the survivors into a list. The crowd filtered out with the satisfied, ugly hum of something that had been fed and was willing to nap now. Kakashi found them under the stairs, half in shadow, wholly themselves. Tomorrow we pretend at normal, he said. Then we pretend at finals. Then we pretend at a civic event that will definitely not go poorly. His eye crinkled. Between those layers of pretend. Do actual training. Anything specific? Sakura asked, already mentally laying wire across 3 maps. Work what you failed at, Kakashi said. I didn't fail at anything, Sasuke said. And let 3 seconds pass before adding, enough. Honesty looks good on you, Kakashi said. He looked at Naruto last. The air around his gaze was kind. Keep letting other people in, he said simply. Naruto wanted to shrug and joke and be light. He didn't. Okay. They split the way teams split when no one wants to be seen deciding which way to walk with who. Naruto ended up heading down the broad stairs toward the lobby with Sakura, who was muttering to herself about angles and how mirrors could be made to eat themselves, and then peeling off when she remembered she'd PR. Omi's to help a sand kunoichi fix a finger she'd dislocated 3 times in the same hour because stubbornness can be a joint problem. He found a vending machine that had 3 items left and no intention of surrendering them. He fought it affectionately and lost. He was regarding the victorious machine with philosophical hatred when a familiar chuckle tilted the hallway. Lose about to steal? Kurogane asked, leaning on the corner like a man waiting for his better nature to arrive by mail. You working security now? Naruto asked, peering at the sword wrapped in a cloth and the lanyard he absolutely had not been issued by any official capacity. Consulting, Kurogane said cheerfully. Enko told me if I breathed wrong at you, she'd rearrange my taxes. That tracks, Naruto said. He tipped his head at the wrapped sword. What's in the package? Regrets, Kurogane said. And lunch. He produced 2 skewers of grilled something that had once had a face and had now become a masterpiece. Naruto took one on the theory that if a man wanted to poison him, he'd have picked a day that didn't already have so many moving parts. You looked different in the ring, Kurogane observed. Cleaner clothes, Naruto said. You moved like something had been taught manners, Kurogane countered. Trying, Naruto said around a mouthful. Fails interestingly. Keep failing where there are brooms, Kurogane advised. He nodded toward the upper decks without moving his head. Your son friends don't like being made to wait. Then they should leave, Naruto said lightly. Eventually they'll bring Daybreak into a room and call it medicine. Kurogane said. His tone did not change. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's amputation with better lighting. Naruto's mouth went dry again for no reason he liked. He finished the skewer and handed the stick back so Kurogane could throw it in a bin and pretend the world worked. Thanks, Naruto said. For the protein. Consider it an investment, Kurogane said. I prefer the interesting ones stay alive long enough for a rematch. I'll bring a vending machine, Naruto promised. Kurogane's grin showed a broken tooth. Bring 2. They split. Naruto found a quiet stairwell and sat on the middle step where acoustics were kind. The building made its noises. Pipes settling, wind whining, the faint bureaucratic shuffle of forms being filed upstairs. He oot his eyes and opened the door inside him just enough to look. The sea rolled in the dark. The spine under the water rose and fell. It waited, not gentle, patient. He did not step nearer. He drew in the sand of himself and let the wave lick it and recede. He did it again. He practiced until practice felt like strength instead of denial. Idiot, a voice said fondly at the bottom of the stairs. Anko leaned in the doorway with a paper cup and a look that said she'd seen worse, better, and was counting. You're doing homework. Better than flunking later, Naruto said without opening his eyes. She crumpled the rim of the cup between finger and thumb until it had a precise crease. Sun people are in the building. I've got them at arm's length. The Hokage has them at arm's length and a smile. Your job is to stay out of their hands and in mine if something goes sideways. Bossy, Naruto said, and breathed in for 4, out for 6, until the taste of iron in the back of his throat went shy. Anko sipped whatever lived in her cup. Good choices today. You'll make worse at some point. Ask for help before or after. During is too late. He opened his eyes finally and looked at her. Lee. A kid who'd been handed a map that admitted there were other towns. You going to be around? She snorted. You wish. Then, after a beat, yes. When night pooled, it did it quickly. The tower hummed down to a lower frequency. Jenin snored. Proctors traded shifts with the low comedy of paperwork. Somewhere in the understructure, a mirror that had been placed behind a maintenance grate reflected a wall, then a hall. Then a pair of beads turning as if deciding. Naruto dreamed he was under the river. The current pulled like conversation. He kept his feet on the riverbed as long as he could and then let himself float when the bottom dropped out. The thing under the water turned a golden eye big as a door, and he felt strangely unafraid because it had blinked slowly, like a cat warming. He woke with his hand clenched around nothing and unclenched it on purpose. Dawn was a rumor. He dressed, splashed his face in a sink that coughed twice before working, and went to knock on a door that he knew would open. Sakura answered with hair in a war with gravity and eyes already awake. Training. Yeah, he said. Wire me into the ground. She grinned in a way that made you remember she liked doing hard things. Let's teach the earth to stop being polite. They found a quiet square of roof and laid out work. Sasuke arrived 10 minutes later with the expression of a man who had been dragged by his better angels to an appointment he'd scheduled himself. Kakashi appeared halfway through like weather. Hinata turned up with towels and water like a saint who refused to call herself one. They practiced not techniques, but choices. Sakura laid wire over a chalk sketch of the lattice. Naruto pushed null-tied runes into the gaps without spilling. Sasuke found the one bead that mattered in a pattern and cut that instead of the obvious. Kakashi switched their positions with a clap and made them to it again from a bad angle. Hinata's Byakugan mapped the way pressure shifted when Naruto lost patience and reset. Gentle voice counting him back into better rhythm. By the time the bell called them down for the day's formalities, their bodies had learned small things you cannot learn any other way. On the way in, Naruto passed a monk with a cracked bead at his wrist speaking very politely to a chunin who had been told to be even more polite back. The monk's face said rain. Naruto kept walking. The tug brushed him, not as a command now, more like a suggestion asking if he'd like to try dinner somewhere quiet. He declined. He didn't see KO again that day. He didn't need to. The idea of her kept its own watch, a neat smile. A lattice tuned so carefully it could slice rain. By sunset, the tower let them go long enough to taste air not processed through bureaucracy. The village open. Its streets like a book you love that has new notes in the margins since you last read it. Children ran, because that's what they do when their parents forget to stop them. Vendors shouted about me, Ando and futures that could be improved with both. Naruto and Hinata ended up on a wall not built for sitting. He swung his legs, she tucked hers. They ate something on sticks that had been PPED in something else and declared it edible. Do you ever regret not being more careful? Naruto asked after a while, thinking of mirrors and snakes and sun beads and his own voice in his head telling him to settle for easy. Hinata looked at him like he'd asked why roofs keep rain out. Careful isn't small, she said. It's choosing where to put both feet. He looked down at his sandals. I'm working on both. You're already doing it, she said. He huffed, embarrassed and pleased and something else he didn't name. He watched a patrol pass by and pretended he didn't hope Anko would look up and see him behaving. She didn't. He felt stupid for wanting the gold star and then decided wanting it meant he cared in the right direction. When he finally rolled off the wall and onto the street, Day had the hushed feel of a market closing and a storm choosing whether to attend. He walked home alone because sometimes that's the only way to measure the shape of a choice. The eyes hummed under his skull, low and patient. He let them. He set the towel, Hinata's towel, on the back of a chair like a flag someone had handed him and he decided not to drop. In the dark of his room, he held the cracked bead in his palm and pressed his thumb against the sun until he felt the little fracture. He didn't wish it whole. He didn't break it further. He just learned its line by touch until he could have picked it out blind from a bag of 100. He slept like a man who intended to get up and do the same on purpose. Chapter 2 End.